like I'm being watched all the time.
During lunch with my in-laws, I got a text from an unknown number. Don't react, they're recording you. The sound of my own fork clinking against the fine china was suddenly deafening, a sharp, metallic sound in a room that had fallen silent. My mother-in-law, Agnes, was smiling, but it was a smile that never reached her cold, assessing eyes. It was a predator's smile, all teeth. My brother-in-law seemed fascinated by his own plate, refusing to meet my gaze. And my husband, Michael, he just ate, his movements calm and methodical, like it was the most ordinary Sunday lunch in the world. It was a perfect portrait of familial dysfunction, a scene I had starred in for years. But then my phone, resting silently on my lap beneath the tablecloth, gave a single, almost imperceptible buzz. I glanced down, unknown number. The message was just 5 words, but they landed like a punch to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. Don't react, they're recording you. I swallowed the lump of fear that had formed in my throat and took a slow, deliberate sip of water, forcing my lips into the same placid smile I always wore in that house. But behind the mask, my mind was spinning, a frantic, chaotic spiral. They were filming me, but why? What could they possibly be trying to catch? I wasn't a criminal, I was just Elena, a wife, a literature teacher, a woman who had learned that the price of peace in this family was to never, ever raise her voice. I had weathered years of Agnes's passive-aggressive jabs, the subtle insults wrapped in polite inquiries. I had endured my husband's silent complicity, the way he would conveniently become fascinated with his phone whenever his mother aimed her casual cruelty in my direction. Something told me this wasn't just about a video. This hidden camera, wherever it was only the beginning. It was a piece of a much larger, more sinister plan they had for me. And that anonymous message, sent from a ghost, was my only warning. My mother-in-law, Agnes, had always looked at me with a thinly veiled disdain. She never forgave me for not coming from what she called a decent family, which was her coded language for a family without money. I've had to sit in silence at this very table while she said, in front of everyone, some people only marry to escape their own lives, her eyes fixed on me. I had just smiled and poured more wine that night, but inside I crumbled. I knew her prejudice was always coded in those fake, brittle smiles, and I knew my husband, Michael, would always, always stay silent. Before we go on, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's a free way to support my work. That message, buzzing silently on my lap, was my warning. Someone in this house was trying to protect me, or maybe testing me. I kept eating, my movements slow and deliberate, while my eyes scanned the room. As a literature teacher, I was trained to read gestures, silences, subtext. Now I was applying that skill to my own life, searching for the plot holes in their performance. A picture frame on the mantelpiece, tilted just a few degrees. A new, shiny smoke detector in the corner of the ceiling that didn't match the older, yellowed one near the kitchen. A new, ugly ceramic bird on the bookshelf that I could have sworn wasn't there last week. Any one of them could be a host, a silent, blinking eye. If so, what were they hopping to capture? An outburst, a single, frustrated phrase they could twist and use against me. My instincts screamed, this was more than just a cruel family game. I was being set up for something bigger. Maybe a legal trap for a custody battle, a false accusation, or just another attempt by Agnes to finally erase me from this family for good. But right then, I did what I do best. I watched and I prepared in silence. If they were filming me, I had to give them the exact opposite of what they wanted. I had to become a fortress of calm, and then I had to start filming too. The game had changed. This wasn't just a family lunch anymore. It was a siege, and I would not be caught off guard. I started mentally listing every humiliation, every backhanded compliment, every time my husband had looked away when his mother took a verbal swing at me. and something new, something hard and cold, began to stir inside me. Revenge. I wouldn't leave this marriage looking like the crazy one, the unstable one, the ungrateful one they were so desperate to create. Not this time. If they wanted to play games, I would learn the rules, but I would win on my terms. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what I'd find the next day when I walked into my husband's office and saw with my own eyes where the footage was being stored. That's when I truly understood. They had been recording me for weeks, and the reason why was far, far worse than I had ever imagined. That night, I waited until the house was completely still. I waited for my husband, Michael, to fall asleep beside me, his breathing deep and even. He snored with the peace of someone who either carries no secrets or has carried them for so long they no longer feel heavy. With my heart pounding against my ribs, I slipped out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway to his office. The door creaked softly as I pushed it open, and I froze, listening, but the only sound was the steady rhythm of his snoring from our bedroom. The computer was still on, the screen casting a faint blue glow in the dark room. And there, in the center of the desktop, was a folder. It was labeled Project A, my initial. It blinked on the screen like a pulsing red warning light. I sat down in his chair, my hands shaking as I moved the mouse and clicked it open. My stomach turned, it was real, it was all real. Inside were dozens of video files, meticulously labeled with dates, times, and to my absolute horror, room codes. Kitchen 0713, mauve. Living room 0715, mauve. Bathroom 0625, mauve. Bedroom 0705, mauve. Bedroom, bathroom. The sheer, sickening violation of it made me want to be sick. They had recordings of me in the most private, vulnerable moments of my life. During arguments I thought were just between my husband and me. During quiet moments, I thought I was alone. I tried to keep my breathing steady as I opened one of the files. There I was, sitting on the living room couch from 3 weeks ago, talking on the phone to my therapist, my voice trembling. I don't know how much longer I can stay in this house, my own recorded voice whispered from the speakers. I feel like I'm being watched all the time. The irony was so grotesque, it made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. They had it all, my moments of weakness, my private fears, my pain. All of it captured and archived like I was some kind of clinical case study. Or a threat to be neutralized. With every click, my rage grew, a cold fire spreading through my veins. They weren't just filming me, they were collecting ammunition. And then I noticed something even worse. I was watching a clip from early July, a tense conversation Michael and I had in the kitchen. But I was wearing a green blouse that I hadn't even bought until the end of that month. I remembered buying it for a specific faculty dinner in August. They were editing the videos, cutting and splicing moments, rearranging my words, my very image, to fit a narrative they had created. They were fabricating a history. But why? What were they trying to prove? That I was unstable, that I was losing my mind, that I was an unfit mother. As I scrolled through the main folder, I saw a subfolder I hadn't noticed before, labeled Audio ASSETS. I clicked it open. Inside was a list of sound files: baby crying loop, MP3, dog barking intense, WAV glass shattering, MP3, door slam, MP3. It took me a moment to understand, but then a wave of nausea washed over me. They weren't just going to twist my words. They were planning to add sounds that weren't there, to create a soundtrack of chaos and violence around me, to paint me as the hysterical center of a storm they had invented. I pushed back from the desk, my breathing shallow, and went back upstairs without making a sound. But something in me had fundamentally, irrevocably changed. I was hurt, yes, humiliated, yes, but the fear was being burned away by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just a toxic family drama anymore, it was a crime. a premeditated psychological assault on my sanity and my privacy. And I would not be the eternal victim. I had to protect myself. I had to get ahead of them. If they were recording, then I would record too. But not in secret. I would do it in a way that left no room for doubt, no place for them to hide. The next morning, I moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The hurt, anxious woman from the day before was gone. In her place was a cold, methodical planner. My first stop was an electronics store. I bought the largest external hard drive they had. My second stop was a coffee shop with a secure public Wi-Fi network. I created a new encrypted email address, one with no connection to my name, and set a password that was a random string of characters I knew I'd have to write down to remember. That night, after Michael was asleep, I went back to his office. My hands were steady this time. I plugged in the hard drive and copied everything. The entire Project A folder, with its dozens of video files and the sickening audio ASSETS folder. I made a backup of the backups. Then I uploaded the encrypted files to my new email address, a final layer of insurance. The next morning, I went to the school where I worked and walked into my principal's office. I need to request a medical leave, I said, my voice even, effective immediately for acute stress. He tried to hide his surprise, but the concern in his eyes was genuine. He approved it without question. I needed time, I needed silence, and most of all, I needed to be out of that house, away from their prying digital eyes. My new office became a small, anonymous cubicle in the back of the public library downtown. For the next few days, I went through every single video, one by one. I wore headphones, a notebook by my side, matching dates, timestamps, and conversations. I was building a timeline of their conspiracy, a map of their lies. And that's when I found it, the one thing that would turn my cold resolve into unbreakable steel. It was a video from my son, Danny's room. The camera was hidden in a teddy bear on his shelf. My mother-in-law, Agnes, was sitting on his bed, tucking him in. Her voice was a sugary, poisonous whisper. "Soon, my sweet boy," she said, stroking his hair, "your mommy is going to go away for a little while to get better, and then this whole house will be ours." My blood ran cold. They were using my son against me. They were poisoning his mind, turning his childhood into a weapon in their sick, twisted game. That was the moment the last remnants of the hurt, passive wife finally died. That was when the pain turned into steel, the humiliation became fuel. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted to have me declared an unfit mother to take my son from me. But I would not wait to be defeated. If they wanted to destroy my image, I would show the world the truth, their truth. The next day, I walked out of the library and straight into the office of a law firm I had found online, one that specialized in surveillance and emotional abuse. This wasn't just a family betrayal anymore. It was a legitimate, prosecutable case of privacy violation, and I was going to press charges, one by one, with no warning. I sat across from a sharp, intelligent lawyer named Julia. I didn't just tell her my story, I showed her. I plugged the external hard drive into her computer. I played the video of my therapy session. I showed her the side-by-side clips proving they had been edited. And then I played the video of Agnes poisoning my son's mind. Julia watched it all, her expression hardening from professional concern into a mask of cold, controlled rage. When the last clip finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at me, her eyes glinting like steel. "They dug their own grave, Elena," she said, her voice quiet but deadly serious. "Now we just have to bury them in it." We started the legal process in secret that very afternoon. We filed the first documents with the court. We requested a full forensic review of the footage to legally prove the evidence of tampering. We filed for an emergency protection order to keep my son from being further used as a pawn in their sick game. And we authorized a private investigation team to conduct a sweep for all hidden cameras in my home. The most ironic part, those videos, the ones they had so carefully collected to build a case that I was an unstable, unfit mother, would now be used under the full authority of the court as the primary evidence to incriminate them. But a legal case, however strong, moves slowly. It works in the shadows. Something was still missing from my plan: exposure. I needed to rip the masks off their faces, not just in a sterile courtroom, but in front of everyone they knew. And for that, I needed the perfect setting, a place where no one could escape the truth. That's how I decided to throw a birthday dinner for myself, a reconciliation dinner. Only this time, the gift would be for them. But before that could happen, something else did, something that almost ruined everything. I was helping my son Danny unpack his school bag when a small, folded piece of paper fell out from between his notebooks. It was handwritten in elegant, cursive script, and it was unsigned. It simply read, "You need to leave. They're going to use the boy." My whole body froze. This wasn't a vague threat. It was a direct warning from someone on the inside. Someone who knew the specifics of their plan. My mind raced, replaying every recent conversation. I remembered something Agnes had said just days earlier, a comment I dismissed as another one of her passive-aggressive jabs. "Danny's been so quiet lately," she'd mused, "like he knows something he shouldn't." It all made sense now. They weren't just planning to use the videos, they were actively trying to turn my own son against me. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest as I walked to his room. I sat on the edge of his bed and gently asked, "Sweetheart, has anyone been saying strange things about Mommy?" He hesitated, his little eyes darting to the door as if he was afraid someone might be listening. Then he whispered, "Grandma said you want to take me away and never come back." My breath caught in my throat. This was worse than I had ever imagined. I held him tight and told him none of it was true, that I would never, ever leave him, that no one had the right to tell him such cruel lies. But I saw the fear and the doubt still lingering in his eyes. They were succeeding. They were using my own child's mind as a weapon. And that I would never forgive. What had started as a cold plan for revenge now had a new, singular, burning purpose: protect my son. The next day, I made a drastic decision. I took the handwritten note to my lawyer, Julia, my hands shaking with a new kind of fury. "They're actively manipulating my son," I told her, my voice low and tight. "I need to protect him, now." She agreed. "This note, combined with the video of your mother-in-law, gives us grounds," she said. "We can file an emergency motion to temporarily suspend her contact with Danny, based on clear evidence of emotional manipulation." And that's what we did. I waited in a state of suspended animation as the court reviewed the request. At home, the tension grew so thick you could cut it with a knife. My husband, Michael, seemed to sense the shift in me. The passive, quiet wife was gone, replaced by someone he didn't recognize, and it terrified him. He started coming home early, his eyes constantly scanning the room, rummaging through drawers and closets when he thought I wasn't looking. One night, I was in the kitchen and saw his reflection in the dark window of the living room. He was at my laptop trying to guess my password. He knew something was coming, but he had no clue that the wheels of justice were already in motion. I was playing their game, but with my own rules, and they didn't suspect a thing. On Friday, I received the email from Julia. The court had granted the motion. My mother-in-law's contact with my son was suspended indefinitely. I read the words, and a slow, silent smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of spite, but of profound, bone-deep relief. For the first time in this whole nightmare, I felt like I was winning. I was protecting the one thing I loved most in this world. No matter how much they lied or manipulated or betrayed me, I was going to fight for my son. And I would win. A part of me was reborn that day, and with it, a coldness I didn't even know I possessed. The very next night, my mother-in-law showed up at my front door. She didn't knock, she stood on the sidewalk and screamed, her voice a raw, hysterical shriek that echoed through our quiet suburban street. "What did you do, you ungrateful brat? You can't keep him from me." My son heard her and ran to the backyard, his hands over his ears. I simply looked at the wild, desperate woman on my lawn, the architect of my misery, and I closed the door. I knew her desperation was only the beginning. But what she did next, in the dead of night, almost made me question my own sanity. The next morning, I found my car had been completely vandalized. Scratched from bumper to bumper and spray painted on the driver's side door in big, white, dripping letters were the words, "Crazy, monster, bad mom." My son saw it before I did. He stood frozen on the sidewalk, his little face a mask of confusion, staring at the slurs. I knelt beside him, my own blood boiling with a rage so cold it felt like ice. "Someone really sad must have done that, sweetheart," I said, my voice gentle, pulling him into a hug. But I knew exactly who it was. I called the police and filed a report. They took photos, asked questions, but made it clear that without street cameras, it would be almost impossible to prove. I stayed quiet. I knew Agnes was counting on that, on impunity. But what my mother-in-law didn't know was that her little siege had taught me to think like her. I had installed a micro camera hidden in a birdhouse, pointing straight at the driveway. That night, after Danny was asleep, I watched the footage. And there she was, Agnes, wearing a black coat with the hood pulled up, leaving her ugly, hateful signature all over my car. My lawyer watched the footage and said just one sentence: "Now we have everything." We attached the video to our case, requesting a full restraining order to keep Agnes away from me, my son, and my home. It was my first real legal win, but it came at a cost. Emotionally, I was drained. My son cried at night, asking me if Grandma hated him now. I told him no, of course not. I lied to protect a little heart that didn't yet understand the complexities of adult betrayal. The following Sunday, during lunch, my husband slammed his fork and knife down on his plate with a clatter that made me jump. "You're tearing my family apart, Elena," he said, his voice low and seething. I didn't even look up from my plate, I just kept eating. I had been waiting for this. He was finally showing whose side he was truly on, and it wasn't mine. But I already knew. His silence in the face of his mother's abuse had always been deafeningly loud. The only thing that had changed was that now, for the first time, I wasn't being passive anymore, and that bothered him. That same afternoon, he tried to physically block me from leaving the house, accusing me of turning our son against his grandmother, spitting out legal terms like parental alienation. I almost laughed. He, who had allowed me to be secretly filmed in my own bathroom, was now lecturing me on our son's emotional well-being. I calmly showed him the court order restraining his mother. He ripped it to shreds in a fit of rage. But I had copies. I always had copies now. The final straw, the one that severed the last, thinnest thread of any hope I had for my husband, came that night. I found Danny crying in the bathroom, his little body trembling. He told me his dad had said that Mommy might be taken away for a while if she doesn't get better soon. I just sat on the cold tile floor and held him for hours, my own tears silent. That was it. They were using the fear of abandonment as a weapon against a child. I couldn't wait any longer. The truth had to come out, not just in court, but in front of everyone. It was time to turn on the lights in that dark, twisted theater. I went back to my birthday dinner plan. I resent the invitations to the whole family, framing it as a moment of reconciliation. They all confirmed, their texts full of fake sincerity. The hypocrites were smiling as they prepared to swallow their own poison. I rented a quiet private room at a local restaurant, set up a projector, and prepared the videos. Every single one. No edits, no cuts, just the raw, unmanipulated truth. During the week leading up to the dinner, my husband started acting strange, glued to his phone, whispering into calls he would take in the garage. One evening, I found a folded paper in his jacket pocket. It was a quote from a law firm that specialized in full custody battles. He was going to try to take my son. But before he could make his move, something completely unexpected happened. His sister Laura asked to meet me alone. I agreed, meeting her at a quiet cafe downtown. She was the only one in that toxic family who had ever remained neutral, almost absent from the drama. But that day, her face was pale and serious. She sat across from me, took a deep, trembling breath, and said, "Elena, I can't keep this in anymore." Her eyes were filled with a guilt so profound it was almost painful to see. "They've been planning this since last year," she whispered, her hands shaking. "The cameras, the videos, all of it." My body went cold. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. It was a printed email. I recognized the sender immediately, my mother-in-law, Agnes. The subject line made my blood freeze. Plan for if Elena snaps. Attached were detailed instructions for installing the hidden cameras and a list of suggested phrases to be used to provoke me. Phrases like, "Are you sure you're okay, dear? Forgetting things again, Elena, and maybe you need some help." Laura explained that she never agreed with it, but she was afraid of being cut off from the family, of losing the financial help she got from her mother. But seeing how far they were going, dragging a child into their sick game, she couldn't stay silent any longer. She slid a small flash drive across the table. "Do whatever you want with this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Just keep me out of it." I took the flash drive with shaking hands. The rage I felt was unlike anything I had experienced before. It was colder, heavier. The pain wasn't just emotional anymore. This was concrete, premeditated evil. My plan for silent revenge had just evolved into something much bigger. Now I could expose not just their actions, but their intent. That night, I plugged Laura's flash drive into my laptop. It didn't just contain the email. It contained years of backed up chat logs and files she had access to. As I sifted through the digital wreckage of their lives, I found a chat log between Michael and his mother from 5 years ago, before we were even married. They were talking about his ex-girlfriend, the one he told me was crazy. The language was chillingly familiar. "She's too emotional," Agnes had written. "We need a way to prove she's unstable before she tries to take anything in the breakup." That's when it hit me, this wasn't their first time. This was a pattern, a playbook. Fueled by this new horror, I started digging. I searched public court records using the ex-girlfriend's name. I found it, a temporary restraining order filed against Michael for harassment, mysteriously dropped just 1 week later. The name on the legal documents as Michael's lawyer made my blood run cold. Arthur Vance, the senior partner at Michael's law firm. He wasn't just a family friend who had helped out, he was part of the machinery. Now it all made sense. My husband wasn't acting alone. He was protected by a system, a network built by his mother and his powerful boss, designed to silence any woman who dared to challenge him. If I wanted to cut off the serpent's head, I'd have to go beyond my own family. I'd have to hit them where it truly hurts, their money and their reputation. I brought everything, the email, the chat logs, the flash drive to my lawyer. She read the email titled, "Plan for if Elena snaps," in a long, stunned silence. Then she looked up at me and said, "This isn't just a divorce case anymore, Elena. This is a criminal conspiracy." We immediately filed a new motion based on the overwhelming evidence of premeditated emotional abuse, illegal surveillance, and attempted judicial fraud. The judge approved it in less than 72 hours. granting a temporary restraining order that legally barred both my husband and my mother-in-law from coming near me or our son. Even so, I went ahead with the dinner. I needed to see their faces. They all showed up dressed in their Sunday best, bearing gifts and rehearsed smiles. They hugged me, called me strong, asked how I was holding up. My mother-in-law even brought me a bouquet of my favorite lilies. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. After the appetizers were served, I stood up, clinking my glass for a toast. I just wanted to thank you all for coming, I said, my voice clear and steady. I wanted to have a moment of reconciliation and to show you all what this family is truly made of. I gave a small nod to the technician I had hired, who was waiting in the back of the room. The lights went down and the projector whirred to life. The first image was gentle, May reading a story to Danny in his bed. Then the screen flickered and an audio clip played, Agnes's voice sharp and cruel. She'll destroy herself, we just need to give her a little push. Then came the side-by-side footage, the edited videos of my supposed meltdowns next to the raw original clips. The room watched in stunned silence as a scene of me crying quietly while reading an old letter from my late father was revealed to have been manipulated into a hysterical, screaming fit. The silence was finally broken by Agnes slamming her hand on the table. "You set this all up," she shrieked. But then, in the most unexpected twist of the night, her own husband, my father-in-law, stood up. "You set it up, Agnes," he said, his voice shaking with a rage I had never seen. "Not her, I bought the first camera, but I never knew you were manipulating the child. You've gone too far." My mother-in-law gasped, looking around for an ally, but found none. Michael, in a panic, rushed toward the tech booth, but it was too late. I gave the final nod. The last clip played, Michael on the phone with his lawyer. "I'll push her until she loses custody," his voice echoed through the silent room. "Then we'll get the house and the kid." An aunt in the corner began to sob. An uncle stood up and walked out without a word. My mother-in-law sat frozen in her chair. My husband just stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. He muttered, "You ruined everything." I looked at him for the last time. "I just took off your masks," I said. "The rest you did all by yourselves." I stood up, walked out of that room, and left them all to sink in the wreckage. In the car, I took a deep, shuddering breath. My heart was still racing, but for the first time in months, it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. My phone buzzed, a new court notification. The judge had approved the request for full temporary custody with a complete no-contact order until the next hearing. The words on the screen felt like a hug. I had one. But when I got home, after I had taken off my shoes and dropped onto the couch, I turned on a lamp and saw it. A single white envelope sitting on the coffee table. No name, no return address. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Inside, there was only a photograph. It was a picture of me, asleep in my own bed. My hair was fanned out on the pillow. The book I'd been reading had fallen beside me. It was from the night before. On the back, a few words were scrawled in angry, handwritten letters. "You still don't know what I'm capable of." The relief I had felt just moments before evaporated, replaced by a fear so cold and so primal it felt like ice water flooding my veins. Someone had been in my house while I slept. After everything I'd exposed, after all the court orders, someone had still gotten through my door. The fear sank in slowly like a poison. I wasn't safe. I had never been. I rushed to check every lock, every window, every crack. It was like reliving the trauma of the hidden cameras, but now the threat was physical. I was sleeping under the same roof where monsters still roamed free. I called my lawyer immediately. "Don't panic," she said, her voice a lifeline of calm in my storm. "Put the photo in a plastic bag and take it to the police first thing in the morning." The next few nights were a living hell. I slept with the lights on, a kitchen knife hidden under my pillow. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside made my heart leap into my throat. I was on the verge of a complete breakdown, and that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted me unstable enough to give up, to walk away in fear. But if there's one thing I had learned from this war, it's that desperation isn't weakness, it's fuel. My lawyer filed for a full perimeter restriction, and this time the judge didn't hold back. A security order with electronic monitoring was granted. But the real violence wasn't just physical, it was mental, and they knew how to play that game. My husband started playing the victim online, posting old photos of him and our son with captions about parental alienation. I was attacked, called cruel, unstable. The pain came back, but this time I had armor. I created an anonymous account and started posting the unedited videos, one by one, with dates and context. What started with 10 views turned into 10,000, then 100,000. The story went viral, and that's when I got a message from a woman I didn't know. It said he did something similar to me years ago, but no one believed me. My revenge had just found a new, powerful ally. We met and she told me a story identical to mine: the recording, the isolation, the attempts to prove she was unstable. But in her case, he had help from a powerful friend who covered it all up: Arthur Vance, the senior partner at my husband's firm. I went back to the legal documents, and there it was. Vance's name was everywhere. This wasn't just my husband, it was a network. With the other victims' permission, we took everything to the Bar Association. But there was one last move to make. The firm's annual charity gala was that Saturday. Both my husband and his partner were set to give a speech on corporate ethics and family values. That would be my final arena. The event hall was packed. My ex-husband and his partner stood on stage, basking in applause, talking about integrity. I waited until they finished. Then I stood up, walked to the AV technician, handed him the final flash drive, and said, "Play this now." I took the stage, picked up the microphone, and said, "Sorry for the interruption, but I thought everyone here deserved to see the real legacy of these men." The room fell silent, then the screen lit up. The side-by-side videos, the plan for if Elena snaps email. The audio of my husband plotting to take my son, the testimony from his first victim. It was all there, projected in high definition. The partner went pale. My ex tried to run for the tech booth, but security stopped him. People gasped, some walked out, others started recording on their phones. I didn't say another word. I just left the stage and walked out, leaving them to their public execution. The next day, both men were suspended. An official investigation was opened. With the evidence from the other victim and the blatant fraud, my husband, his mother, and the partner were all indicted on criminal charges. My custody of my son was made permanent. I saw their faces on the news, not as powerful men, but as criminals. And me, I went back to living. I moved to a small, quiet town, to a house on a street where neighbors waved to each other. My son laughs often now. He is growing up light-hearted and safe. I never got another threat, never saw another strange car. Never again had to sleep with a knife under my pillow. Today, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the exhausted, terrified woman who used to fear her own home. I see a survivor, a mother, a force. And if anyone ever tries to erase me again, I hope they know. I already went to war with my own family and came back with their heads on a platter.